You have probably seen the footage before. A Hawker Typhoon rolls into its dive. 8 rockets tear away from the wings, trailing smoke towards the ground. And then, very often, the film cuts before impact. The viewer is left to complete the story. For decades, that image helped build the legend of Britain's brutal tank killer. A direct rocket hit could cause catastrophic damage. Yet when British operational researchers later examined hundreds of German armoured vehicles left behind after the fighting, the numbers told a far more complicated story. The Typhoon really was dangerous. The question is whether we have been looking at the wrong targets. Because this aircraft began as a troubled fighter, found its war close to the ground, and became part of a tactical air campaign capable of turning roads, transport, and movement into a serious German problem. And the most revealing number in the Typhoon story is not the number of rockets it fired.
It is the number of wrecks
Those researchers could actually explain. Friends, we are very close to 1,000 subscribers. Please help us reach it. Press the hype button, leave a comment, and subscribe. Thank you. Now, back to the Typhoon. Britain had wanted a successor to the Hurricane. Hawker's new fighter was intended to answer the demand for greater speed and power. When the Typhoon entered RAF service in 1941, its performance looked impressive enough for the RAF Museum to describe it as the service's first 400-mile-per-hour fighter. The speed was real. So were the problems. The aircraft and its Napier Sabre engine suffered serious development difficulties. The Typhoon's early career was hardly a smooth progression from promising design to successful fighter. It was fast. It was heavily armed. It was also an aircraft still trying to find where it belonged. The war began to provide an answer at low altitude. The Typhoon proved capable against the low-level Focke-Wulf 19 raids, crossing the channel for quick attacks. From August 1942, Typhoons were also being used on offensive sweeps against targets, including enemy airfields and communications. The aircraft survived its troubled beginning. Its role started to shift. Closer to the ground, speed still mattered. 4 20mm cannon gave the Typhoon formidable firepower. Roads, railway targets, airfields, and transport presented a very different problem from high-altitude interception. Below the aircraft was an increasingly important battlefield. By the time the war moved into northwest Europe, the Typhoon had become closely associated with low-level attack and tactical support. That evolution should not be cleaned up into a story of a failed fighter suddenly becoming perfect. The aircraft still brought operational demands and limitations. Britain had simply begun asking it different questions. Could it reach a ground target quickly?
Could it strike hard?
Could it attack movement and communications? Could it support troops fighting close to German positions? In that environment, the Typhoon made far more sense. Then came the rockets. The 3-inch rocket projectile gave the aircraft a spectacular new weapon. In the wartime configuration examined by RAF research, a rocket-firing Typhoon carried 8 projectiles beneath its wings. 8 smoke trails, 8 violent departures from the aircraft, 8 chances for a camera to capture one of the defining images of the air war over Europe. With the warhead used against armoured targets, a direct hit could cause serious and usually irreparable damage. Against a tank, the impact could be devastating. There was an awkward problem. A tank is a very small target when approached at speed in an aircraft firing unguided rockets. The pilot had to judge his firing range. The aircraft had to be correctly positioned. Side slip or pulling G could alter the rocket's impact point. Combat conditions added yet another layer of difficulty. Once released, the rockets could not correct themselves. A direct hit was devastating. Securing one was the hard part. A wartime assessment, later discussed in an RAF air power study, examined operational rocket accuracy from attacks during April and May 1944. Using the combat accuracy recorded, the study calculated the probability of an 8-rocket salvo securing a single hit on a tank-sized target of roughly 200 square feet. The result was about 0.7%. That figure requires care. It was derived from the combat accuracy being examined. It does not mean every Typhoon attack in every circumstance had an identical 0.7% chance of success. Nor does it mean rockets never destroyed tanks. They did. A direct strike could be catastrophic. The importance of the calculation is different. It forces us to separate the weapon preserved in wartime imagery from the weapon pilots actually had to aim under combat conditions.
The camera shows the rockets leaving.
Memory supplies the explosion. Operational research asks a colder question. What was physically found afterwards? Following the fighting around the Falaise pocket and the German withdrawal towards crossings over the Seine, operational research teams searched the area. They recorded 667 German tanks, self-propelled guns, and other armoured vehicles left behind. The researchers did not claim to have found every German vehicle in the area. Of the 667 they recorded, 385 were examined to establish why they had been left behind, and, where possible, how they had been destroyed. The number attributed to rockets was 14. 14 out of 385 examined armoured vehicles, about 3.6%. Pause there, because this is where a bad documentary can make a second mistake. The first is to claim Typhoon rockets destroyed every German tank beneath them. The second is to see the number 14 and declare that the Typhoon was useless.
The evidence supports neither story.
The researchers found that the popular image of rockets routinely destroying tanks was too simple. Direct hits on small armored targets were difficult. Pilot claims and the physical examination of wrecks were not the same form of evidence. Yet those same investigations pointed towards a broader effect from tactical air attack. To see it, we have to stop staring at the tank. Picture a panzer formation as an organization rather than a line of armored vehicles. A tank needs fuel, ammunition, maintenance. Its crews require support. Orders have to move. Supplies have to arrive. The division itself must travel from one position to another. Much of that work relies on vehicles considerably more vulnerable than a tank. Lorries, cars, fuel transport, ammunition vehicles. The armor attracts the eye. The softer vehicles help keep it fighting. Now the Typhoon looks different. Its 4 20mm cannon were dangerous against soft-skinned transport. In the wartime research sample of German lorries and cars, machine gun and cannon fire from the air emerged as the most effective aerial weapon category recorded. 377 of the 1,361 examined lorries and cars were attributed to machine gun or cannon fire from the air, roughly 28% of the examined sample. That image is less famous than a rocket smashing into a tank. Operationally, it may tell us far more. Destroy a lorry and the immediate loss is obvious. Attack the vehicles at the head and tail of a column and the effect can spread beyond the machines actually struck. Traffic may become trapped, movement slows. Vehicles caught in congestion can later be abandoned. Equipment that cannot be moved may be destroyed by its own crews to prevent capture. The operational researchers themselves noted that fighter bombers commonly concentrated on vehicles at each end of a convoy to box in those in the middle. Their conclusion was cautious, but important. Fighter bombers were probably responsible for the loss of more vehicles than the direct air damage figures alone suggested. Some vehicles trapped in traffic could appear in later records as abandoned, undamaged, or destroyed by their crews. The aircraft's influence could therefore reach beyond wrecks carrying obvious rocket damage. Here, the familiar Typhoon story begins to bend. Its most famous target may not have been its most revealing one. Normandy made movement a battlefield problem. German forces trying to reposition, regroup, and resupply operated under repeated Allied pressure against transport and communications. The Typhoon formed part of that pressure. It did not fight alone. It did not defeat German ground forces by itself. British and Canadian operations on the ground mattered. Other Allied aircraft mattered. American ground and air power played a major role in the wider campaign. Artillery, supply, and command decisions all shaped the battle. The Typhoon belongs inside that larger picture. Its importance lies in what it contributed. On forward airfields in Normandy, Typhoons operated close to the land battle. Imperial War Museum's photographs show pilots of operational wings discussing missions and aircraft taking off from Normandy fields armed for attack. Some Typhoons flew standing patrols in a system known as the cab rank. The name sounds almost casual. The principle was anything but casual. Aircraft could remain available overhead, awaiting calls from ground forces for strikes against German targets, obstructing the Allied advance. First, a target had to be identified. The request had to move through the tactical control system. Suitable aircraft had to be available. Then the strike had to arrive while the target was still relevant to the battle below. Air attack was being tied more closely to the tempo of ground operations. The Typhoon was no longer simply a fighter searching for an enemy aircraft. It could be directed towards a battlefield problem. A gun position, transport, a strong point, vehicles on a road, a target delaying Allied troops. Aircraft above the battlefield could be waiting for the call. That was the logic of the cab rank. Its importance came from coordination, readiness, communication, aircraft operating close enough to respond, ground forces able to request support, pilots accustomed to low-level attack, and an aircraft once troubled in the role imagined for it, now being used in a role shaped by the war itself. This is the British part of the Typhoon story worth remembering. Britain did not need to turn the aircraft into a flawless version of the fighter originally planned. The RAF found where its strengths could be useful and increasingly built operations around them. Low-level speed, 4 20mm cannon, rocket capability, rapid attacks against ground targets, a growing place within tactical air support. Weapons stories are often told backwards.
We know the reputation.
So we assume the machine was always destined to earn it. The Typhoon was not. Nobody watching the aircraft enter service in 1941 possessed the advantage of knowing what the battle in Normandy would require 3 years later. Its later fame cannot simply be projected backwards onto its development. The aircraft changed roles. The demands of the battlefield changed around it. The RAF adapted. By August 1944, during the fighting around Mortain and Falaise, German formations faced immense pressure from Allied forces on the ground and in the air. During the withdrawal eastwards from the Falaise area towards the Seine, movement itself became increasingly dangerous. That is the environment in which the Typhoon's wider value becomes clearer. A tank under cover or dispersed from other vehicles could be extremely difficult to hit directly with a rocket. A road network crowded with movement offered different opportunities. Transport columns exposed softer targets.
Repeated air attack
Could delay, disrupt, and complicate movement even when an individual rocket failed to strike an armored vehicle. The wreck count corrected the legend. It did not make the aircraft irrelevant. In some ways, it gives us a better story. The Typhoon's popular reputation was built around the most spectacular weapon beneath its wings. The research suggests its battlefield value cannot honestly be reduced to confirmed rocket kills against tanks. The picture is wider. Cannon fire against transport, rockets against suitable ground targets, attacks on communications, rapid response to requests from troops below, pressure on movement. A tactical air campaign in which the Typhoon became one of Britain's best-known low-level strike aircraft. The legend gives us one explosion. The evidence gives us a battlefield. Think back to the film. The Typhoon dives. 8 rockets leave its wings. Smoke cuts across the frame. Then the footage ends. For years, the missing impact was easy to imagine. Tank destroyed, target gone, another kill. The wartime research demands more care. Sometimes the rockets hit. Against small armored targets, very often they did not. The aircraft still mattered. Because the road mattered. The lorry carrying fuel mattered. The ammunition transport mattered. The ability to move, regroup, and resupply mattered. The Typhoon became dangerous because its contribution was never confined to the dramatic instant of a rocket striking armor. Its battlefield influence reached into movement itself. That is more complicated than the simple tank killer legend. It is also a far more interesting British story. A troubled aircraft entered RAF service carrying serious problems. The role for which it had originally been intended did not define its entire career. The RAF found value at low altitude, expanded the Typhoon's ground attack work, and integrated it into a developing system of tactical air operations. An imperfect fighter became a formidable strike aircraft. No miracle, no perfect weapon. Adaptation. And in war, adaptation can be worth more than perfection. With the end of the war in Europe, the Typhoon's specialized role was finished, and the aircraft quickly disappeared from RAF service. Its image survived. The rockets remained in the film. The smoke trails remained in the photographs. So did the name. Hawker Typhoon. Britain had asked it to succeed the hurricane. History remembers it for something quite different. Perhaps the fairest way to remember the Typhoon is neither as an aircraft that destroyed every German tank beneath it, nor as a legend demolished by one awkward set of numbers. It found the battlefield where its strengths mattered. A British fighter pulled down from the war it had been designed to fight, and adapted for the war unfolding below. The film may cut before impact. The evidence does not end there. If this closer look changed how you see the Typhoon, subscribe to Defiant Britain WW2 and tell us which RAF aircraft we should investigate next.